Hi, my name is Ann Dawson, and I'm a worker. I've had 5 jobs in my life. I started out at a can redemption center, then I got a job at a lumber yard, then I got a job at a plastic pipe factory, and then I got a job at a UPS distribution center. I also worked as a camera person for an indie wrestling company, CCW. Unfortunately, we are not going to be talking about that exciting job. We are going to be talking about my time at one of the more mundane ones. Today, we are going to talk about my time at the plastic pipe factory, Spears Coastline Plastics. I started out as a stacker whose job is more or less to check the finished product for any imperfections, stack it in a specific way so it can fit in the bag, then bag it, and then send it away to the warehouse where it is one day shipped to retailers or directly to a construction company. I'm sure. I don't know how that side of it works. It was repetitive and monotonous work, but I kind of enjoyed it in a way. Just turn my brain off for 8 hours and collect a paycheck. Of course, it wasn't always that simple. The factory was constantly understaffed, and this resulted in stackers having to take on more than one line at a time. To put it in some context, 1 line is usually a breeze, 2 lines is honest work, and 3 lines is a nightmare. Of course, not all pipes are created equal. Some pipes come out of the extruder machines slower and faster than others. So this might result in a situation where a stacker is assigned 2 slow lines and 1 fast line, and that might be okay. But just the same, you could be assigned 2 fast lines and drown in a puddle of your own sweat. It was a fucking nightmare. It fucking sucked. The problem of understaffing was exacerbated by the lack of quality training. New hires often quit or were fired after not receiving enough training and consequently not knowing how to do their jobs, leading to them getting yelled at by the boss. An experienced stacker is paired with the new hire to show them the ropes, but that experienced stacker still has their own lines to manage, meaning that they can't teach the new hire until they themselves are caught up. And this often led to there not being any time for the stacker to teach the new hire what to do. They were left with no choice but to give the new hire general advice such as look out for imperfections and bag the pipe well, but there was never any time to tell the new hire what imperfections one should look out for or what well-bagged pipe even looked like. The new hire experience was being thrown on a line with only a hazy idea of what to do or what to expect. I recall that I didn't really feel confident in my job until a month and a half in. Funny enough, 6 months in, I was told I was the best worker in the factory by managers and coworkers alike, which was hilarious to me because when I was still figuring out the job, they were yelling at me and taking bets on how soon I'd be fired or quit. On one particularly hot Florida summer day, I was managing 2 fast lines and 1 slow line, when suddenly I felt a pat on my back. I turned around to see what was what, and what was a stranger who wanted to tell me I was doing a good job. If I stopped to chit-chat, I would fall behind and probably get yelled at, and so I had no choice but to be like, yeah, okay, good, and then turn around to get back to work. Later on, my shift manager came by to say, did you know who that was? That was the VP of the whole company. I don't know why that mattered because I didn't receive anything for doing a good job. I didn't get a raise. I didn't get promoted. I didn't even get a fucking towel to wipe off the sweat. Nope, just an empty compliment and back to work. Communication and directions were also a serious point of failure and an everyday igniter of stress. The demands made upon stackers were inconsistent day by day, to say the least. On one day, the quality of the pipe is paramount to the company's success, and on other days, the pipe could be fucking garbage, but we were told to bag it up anyway. One of the most common imperfections we stackers would find on pipes would be trash. Somewhere along the production line, debris could find its way in the plastic, and when it would come out of the extruder machine, it would result in a kind of crater with a little tiny chunk of the plastic poking out. Now, we were only told this was bad pipe if it were on the outside of the pipe, where it could be seen. But if it were on the inside of the pipe, where it could not be seen, then it was fine. We could bag it up and send it to retailers or construction sites. wherever the hell it goes. Never mind that this is a huge structural flaw that could lead to leaks, the thing you don't want your pipes doing. You gotta hand it to capitalism always producing the highest quality of product, or at least the appearance of quality. Genuine quality doesn't actually matter. Genuine quality only matters when there are regulators inspecting the place. You gotta keep up appearances every now and then, to protect that bottom line. The American way. Considering that a lot of that pipe was supposedly intended for fire sprinkler systems, it's hard to sleep at night. Anyway, I did what I was told enough to eventually be promoted to the high rank of blending operator. My job now involved putting a bunch of chemicals into a bunch of hoppers and making sure those chemicals made their way into an industrial blender where they were mixed in with plastic beads. This job had a number of perks. For instance, I had less coworkers, and as an introvert, the less people I have to interact with on a daily basis, the happier I typically find myself. And also, the managers never really came back to check up on us, or very rarely anyway, and so we got to be a bit more relaxed and casual than we otherwise would have been. And I got to learn how to use a forklift, and that was fun. I had a lot of fun on the forklift. But what's more, the biggest thing, was that the plastic beads came to the factory by train, meaning I got to work on trains for a little bit every now and again. And that was cool because trains are cool. Also, I got paid a bit more. By the time I left the factory, I was making $14.50 an hour, which is almost what the minimum wage should be, $15. Now, the bad parts. The environment was absolutely fucking disgusting, and the machines were in a constant state of disrepair. They were only held together by the willpower of duct tape and by the grace of God. Chemicals were constantly leaking from the hoppers and the pipes in any machine they interacted with. They filled the air every single day. The worst one, though, were the dyes we used. The dyes were an incredibly light, powdery material, and any slight disturbance to them would have them burst into the air, and they would just stay there in the air. These orange, tan, or black clouds of just toxic miasma just hanging out. They would get everywhere. On my clothes, on my face, in my mouth, and definitely in my lungs. If I have any medical issues later in life, they probably came from this job. Now, as a lowly worker, I can see only two solutions to these problems. The first solution is to give the workers masks so they don't have to breathe in these toxic chemicals, and two, fix the machines so they're not leaking the chemicals in the first place. Ideally, they do both, but of course, they did neither. We did have a maintenance department that would do the best they could, but at some point, the problems they needed to fix required replacing the parts, and getting replacement parts was expensive, so the company decided, they're not going to do that. And as far as masks were concerned, they assured us that the chemicals were not hazardous. This was in spite of the fact that the bags that the chemicals came in said hazardous. Do not breathe. What's really fucking frustrating about it though is they would yell at us and get mad if we brought in our own masks. I really don't know what that was about. They just want us to suffer, I guess. What the fuck? Also, it was just really loud. They did provide us with those little orange earplugs, but they only did so much, and I know there isn't like a good way of making those giant industrial machines quieter, but you can at least provide your workers with quality hearing protection. Between the plastic pipe factory job and the lumberyard job, I cannot hear very well. At some point, the company decided to switch from its regular 24/7 schedule to a 24/5 schedule, and in that shuffle, I got moved to the night shift, which was unworkable for us. I had already moved in with Deanne, aka the Digital Diviner, check out her content, and having a conflicting schedule with her just proved very, very depressing for me and her. So I decided that job really wasn't worth it. That was the final thing that pushed me over the edge and finally resulted in me just saying fuck it and quit. And so that's the bulk of my story of my time at Spears Coastline Plastics. Now for the other stuff that doesn't really fit neatly into the narrative, but I still wanted to mention. Things such as how they didn't let stackers listen to music while they worked. I could have listened to so many podcasts and so many audiobooks, and I would have done the exact same amount of work. It was bullshit. The only reason I could think is work is supposed to suck, so the bosses make it suck more, I guess. When I was a stacker, I had a very helpful shift manager who was so helpful, in fact, that they even took over lines if we were particularly understaffed that day or if a stacker was particularly overwhelmed. Now, the plant manager took some time out of his air-conditioned office to come yell at him for being so helpful, and ever since that day, he had no choice but to patrol the lines, looking very, very bored. It was really sad to see the natural human inclination to be kind and helpful sucked out of a person by the demands of capitalist hierarchy. There was a very hostile relationship between the plant manager and the extruder operators. To keep it simple, the extruder operators were the ones who made the pipe itself. They definitely had the hardest job and worked in the most stressful conditions. They sure as hell did not need some asshole boss coming in to cuss at them every now and again for whatever reason they could concoct. One day, a company executive came to the factory to do an unannounced inspection. Once the extruder operators realized this, they conspired together to conveniently forget to leave their walkie-talkies on, which resulted in the company executive overhearing the plant manager being shitty and abusive, causing the plant manager to be demoted down to simple warehouse duties and replaced by a plant manager from somewhere else in the company. That was definitely the most dramatic, most political, most TV show thing to ever happen in that factory, and it was really cool to see and hear about from other coworkers. The company updated its bathroom policy so that employees could use whichever bathroom matched their gender identity, which at first seemed really cool and very progressive of them, but they made the announcement with gritted teeth and barely contained contempt. So the announcement for me went something along the lines of, oh, you guys actually suck. Oh. If I actually wanted to utilize this policy, you guys would give me shit for it. I see. I hear you. Cool. But without a doubt, the worst thing that ever happened at that place was one of the stackers was a very elderly man, and at one point, he got very sick. And day after day, he would keep coming to work, and day after day, he would get obviously weaker and weaker until one day he didn't show up to work, and we found out that he didn't show up because he had died. And it was just, I don't know, you always hear stories like that of people working themselves to death, but it's another thing to actually see it happen. Like, fuck. It's just fucked up. So yeah, that's all of the big stuff. I definitely regret working there. I most of all regret not at least trying to unionize. I mean, I can make excuses like I wasn't as politically aware or conscious or as confident then as I am now. And when you think about that story I just told about the extruder operators conspiring and organizing to fight back, you can definitely see that there might be some sympathy towards organizing, but shoulda, woulda, coulda, I guess. Anyway, I suppose I should say something now, make some sort of ultimate point, but the point is always, it sucks working under capitalism. It sucks seeing people hired and fired on an endless cycle for minuscule mistakes or things that are completely out of their control or things that could have been fixed through time and genuine effort and compassion. It sucks having to see people's humanity sucked out of them by the demands of capitalism. It fucking sucks that my health is probably fucked because of the conditions I had to work in. And it sucks watching people fucking work themselves into the grave. It's amoral and unacceptable. I guess I hope, if anything, that by sharing my work experiences with you, it'll open yourself up, you the viewer, to sharing your own, either in a video of your own or with just other people in general. Maybe through that we'll build some class consciousness and Maybe through sharing our struggles together, we will end up struggling together. Before you go, check out these folks. The idea for this video came from Alki, who did a video talking about their experiences working for an NBA stadium, so check that out. Also, Actual Context has an amazing two-parter about the Punisher police problem, where you can learn more about the Punisher as a character and how absurd and terrifying it is that the police identify with that character. And do you think there should be more politics in video games? Specifically leftist politics. Check out Left Up's video, The UK Games Industry Has an Issue with Class, that very quickly goes over gaming industry demographics and stats to reveal a disappointing reality. And as always, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. I really like getting comments, algorithm aside. I like hearing what people have to say, so please comment. And have a wonderful day.